Well, good afternoon, everyone. My name's Ian Macara, and welcome to Dementia Friendly Worthing's Come Zoom with Us. There are also some other sessions going on that hopefully you'll find helpful. Looking at some legal matters, and then Gill Lynes of Carpenter Box Financial Advisors. So we'll be about 30 minutes, like we say, and we'll put some further information up on the Dementia Friendly Worthing website for some additional information. So a little bit about ourselves. Who are we and why are we here? So I'm covering the legal side of things. So I'm senior partner at Bennett Griffin. I do a lot with post-retirement advice. One of the key things you'll be hearing about is where you obtain your advice from. So we very much focus on being accredited by Solicitors for the Elderly, by the Court of Protection, also Dementia Friends Champions. And the reason I'm volunteering here is as part of the steering committee for Dementia Friendly Worthing. A little bit about our other speaker today, Gill. Gill is a member of the Chartered Institute of Insurers. She's also part of the Dementia Friends champion team. And in particular, I'd highlight her being a Society of Later Life advisor with particular exams and expertise in this area. So to get us started, I saw this on one of my kids' games, and it's Don't Get Got. Seems very basic. But the game is about tricking people, and it's not a direct game like a board game where you're sat opposite and you're thinking about it and you're looking out for them. Don't know about Monopoly, you always got your eye on the banker, haven't you? This one is where during the evening you get little tasks and you try and sneak them into the evening without someone knowing, and then at the end, when they have done what you've tried to trick them into doing, you reveal your card and you get your points. And so what we're looking at today is maybe not what's immediately obvious, but from our experience in advising people, both preventing and sadly trying to clear up the mess after someone's been taken advantage of. Very briefly, this slide is just where we're focused on today. So the green bit is the things we know we know. The red, the things we know we don't know. But there's a big area in life of things that we don't know we don't know. And so what we want to do is raise awareness and knowledge today so we can make any choices. So I'm going to focus on the legal toolbox if we move on to that slide. So that should come up. This was something the government have been raising awareness of with this phrase, choice not chance, which I think is really valuable and informative and memorable. So do we want to leave things to choice, to chance, or do we want to exercise our informed choice? And right in the middle of there, we could be focused on many different things, wills, care, mental capacity, but today, just for these sort of 10 minutes, I'm going to focus on powers of attorney. So if we move on. So in your legal toolbox, you might just want to mentally tick these off or raise a question mark by it or make it an action point. Is your will up to date? Is it fit for purpose? Because nowadays your wills can have a great impact on your tax, on care fees. Sadly, if a family's separated, there might be some careful planning that's needed. We'll talk about powers of attorney in a minute, but do you have a letter of wishes? Are you setting out what your wishes are so that if someone tries to wheedle in and make decisions or direct you in a way, you've documented what your wishes are? Certain health things like do not attempt resuscitation and advance directives are helpful. The other sorts of things that are useful to have in your legal toolbox, a summary of your family and just the relationships, a summary of your assets. A key one, an inventory of important contents of possessions. That's not always financially, that could be emotionally. It's invested with memories. And again, as we become older and potentially vulnerable, they can have importance and can cause a lot of distress if they're not handled carefully. And keys to property. So that's the toolbox, but we're going to focus on powers of attorney now. So many of you, many of us have a driving license, and many of us have baked beans. They don't have to be Heinz, but hopefully these are memorable visuals for you. So a power of attorney, Alan Eccles, who's the former public guardian, said, and you can read that, we want lasting powers of attorney to be as well known as driving licenses, affordable, flexible, and accepted wherever they're used. But the key point there is is a power of attorney just like a baked bean tin that you go into Tesco's or you shop around for the cheapest one, you take it off the shelf and put it in the cupboard? Well, I'd suggest it's not. And with a driving license, you have to have had a theory test, and that's where drafting the powers of attorney you could think of. But you also have to have a practical test. You have to go out in a car with someone experienced to see that you can drive properly. And that's where a lot of the risks and problems arise in my professional experience, particularly with attorneys who haven't got the practical experience and haven't been seen to drive your car, your life, your resources carefully and well. So what are the risks? So risks with powers of attorney is what type of power of attorney it is. If we move on the slide. So some of you may have an enduring power. Some of you may have lasting powers, and some of you might not have a power of attorney at all. So some practical things to think about. Who holds the original document? That is key. Who is your gatekeeper to that? Have you got it? Or has your solicitor got it? Or has a third party got it? Because when it comes to either using it or registering it, the original is vital. I'm helping a family at the moment where the solicitor held it and two daughters have a difference of opinion. So we've been able to resolve things carefully and legally without someone running off and taking steps that might have put someone at risk. Similarly, I'm helping someone who a child has it and has gone off to register it when we don't think it should be. And it's been difficult because we don't have possession of it. So that's a really important basic point. Then we get into the drafting of it. Is it just a DIY or someone inexperienced who's drafted it? Or does it meet your particular wishes, your particular needs to safeguard those wishes? So for example, being accredited by Solicitors for the Elderly, we've got 49 different example clauses covering a whole variety of wishes and controls and safeguards that might be relevant. But if you didn't know they existed, you couldn't make an informed choice. And then the final point I just highlight is, do the attorneys know what their limits of their powers are and the extent of their duties? And often they don't. So one of the risks is at the end is that a lot of people create their powers of attorney at a crisis when there's a time frame that's urgent, rather than preparing them carefully and in a measured way. Real life problems. I've mentioned a couple of these. I've had it where an attorney was made, a carer was made attorney, and then received a gift, so to speak, that was very hard for the police to prove wasn't. And then I found that there was a will leaving everything to this gentleman, rather than to the lady's daughter, who was in a care home. And so it got very complicated, but we managed to resolve it with applying to the court for an urgent will. We supported the police and there was a conviction. But it's much better to prevent these than to try and clear up problems afterwards. So briefly, solutions and prevention. So seek advice from an accredited advisor. Bizarrely, wills, powers of attorney are all unregulated, so anyone can advise on them. Seek to have your documents personalised for your wishes, rather than just off the shelf like a tin of baked beans. Spend some time thinking about the supporting papers, so that if you were temporarily poorly and couldn't say what your wishes were, that those are documented somewhere, so you're not just relying on what people say. And also think about making sure your attorney, when you choose them and also when they accept their role, has had some sensible advice, and then takes advice when they want to make major decisions. And then finally, I'm just going to provide some information on something quite exciting and new, which is a power of attorney insurance bond. This has been talked about for years, but in the last month or so, they've actually come online, so that if you have made a power of attorney, you can take out a one-off payment for your attorney, so that if they made an innocent mistake, or if something went wrong, you wouldn't be out of pocket, the insurance company would then make good those lost funds. It's something that where I'm one of 71 Court of Protection panel deputies, and for all deputies they have to take out a bond. And where I've been appointed and someone's been subject to fraud, even if there isn't a criminal conviction, I can sometimes apply to the court to call in the bond where there's been some fraud or inappropriate decision making by an attorney or a deputy, and then replace those funds. And this is what's led to the power of attorney insurance bond. So we'll put up some information about that. If you've got any questions or that's something you'd like, you can take it out before the power of attorney is made. You can take them out after the power of attorney is made. And the prices start at £99 with this company, depending on the amount of cover you want. So that's worth looking into. So to conclude, have a health check of any existing power of attorney, consider the new power of attorney bond, and have a health check of your other documents in your legal toolbox to make sure they're fit for purpose. And the final slide is don't get got and keep calm, but the clock is ticking. So not doing anything is the major limiting factor in protecting you and your finances. So thanks for listening to that. If I can be of any further help, then do contact me directly, and I'll pass over to Gill.
You're looking at financial advice and making any sort of financial decision, as Ian alluded to, who you choose to advise should be based on reputation. And as Ian's mentioned, Ian is a full member of STEP, and he's also a full member of Solicitors for the Elderly. Ian's mentioned that I'm a member of SOLA, and SOLA really do emphasise care for the elderly. And we have to go through quite a rigorous accreditation programme. We really do treat our clients with respect and very, very well. To go on to the next slide, at the start of our top practical tips here is, have you got too much money? Is there too much money in your current account? I've got lots of elderly clients who like to keep a large amount of money in their current account. And of course, people are more and more tech savvy these days. And if your current account is emptied, your bank will, generally speaking, eventually refund to you. But if it's in another account, if it's in a savings account or tucked away in national savings and investments, then you shouldn't have that problem in the first place. So that would be a tip for you to say, well, okay, I really don't need to keep a large amount of money in my current account. It's not earning me any interest. And is it safe? I know plenty of elderly clients who like to get a balance on a regular basis from an ATM machine. You never know who's looking over your shoulder. If the money's not in your current account, then it can't be extricated from there. So that would be my first tip. And also to pay attention to the Financial Services Compensation Scheme limits, where you have a large amount with one particular institution. The limit is £85,000. So beyond that, you're subject to risk from the provider. So if the provider went down, anything in excess of that you might not get back. So it's just to mention that. It's not fraud as such, but just to mention that. During the coronavirus, we've seen quite a few people be contacted on the telephone, and what we'd say is, do use a blocking device. Lots of people do have a blocking device. Some people don't. So which has got some really good guidance on how to get that in place. I have had elderly clients say that they are worried that they might not be able to be contacted by perhaps the doctor or the hospital or somebody trying to get hold of them if they've blocked all numbers. But you can get blocking devices who will pass those calls on to your attorney, to a relative, to a trusted friend, and then they can pick up those calls for you. Would also say don't ever give payment details on the phone if you're phoned by somebody demanding money from you. And do be aware, unfortunately, it is possible for fraudsters to purchase numbers, telephone numbers, which look perfectly legitimate. However, they are not. So if you do get a call from somebody purporting to be your bank, which you weren't expecting, the advice would always be to hang up the telephone and then to look at the number that is on the back of your cheque card or on your chequebook and to telephone that. Where possible, if you have a bank such as First Direct, where you can speak to an actual human being, that would be better yet. There are plenty of banks that will offer you the chance to have a named advisor. So that's another good top tip, if you can do that too. On to the next slide, which is new scams on the block. So touching on coronavirus, the test, track and trace will not ask you for payment. There are some scams going around at the moment whereby you are contacted by someone purporting to be from this government department and telling you that you have to pay in excess of £50 for a kit, for a swab kit. That simply won't happen. So that is definitely a scam. There is another newish one going around at the moment whereby somebody purports to be from your bank. They contact you to tell you that there is a fraudulent payment taking place, and they say that they have sent you an email with a code on it, and they're asking you to give the code over the telephone. Well, again, don't do that, but in that way they can take any money that's in that account. And then obviously it's up to you to try and get that back with the help of your bank. Other scams which are going around, which perhaps you won't get caught on quite so much at the moment because there are no fairs or events of this sort going on, but I thought it was worth mentioning that a client of mine completed a postcard at the South of England show. I think he saw it on a gardening stand or something like that. And it was for a competition, and he filled in his details, and he was then contacted some weeks later by another company, and to cut a long story short, he lost quite a lot of money because he invested in a fraudulent investment, and unfortunately he was caught out like that. So I would say, you know, don't fill in these postcards. You don't know if your information is going to be sold on to a third party who might not be honest. The trader themselves may be perfectly legitimate, but if the information is sold on, you don't know who is going to get hold of this. I have a new scam, which is very, it was a new one on me. I have to say I hadn't heard this one before, and I did find it quite upsetting, really. I'll give you the case study. This is where there was an elderly couple, and the husband sadly passed away from cancer, and his wife placed an obituary in the local newspaper. Among the details, she quoted her husband's date of birth, his date of death, and stating words along the lines that he had lost his long battle with cancer, very sadly. Unfortunately, within a few days, the wife, Ina, was contacted over the telephone by someone who claimed to be a clairvoyant. And Ina, she was in no state to think this is, you know, a bit suspicious nonsense, agreed to give a very small sum of money for this person to try and contact her late husband. Which I, you know, some people might think, oh goodness, that was silly, but she was in no state to be making rational decisions at this point, and agreed to do so. And over the period of weeks, the fraudsters continued to call, and she paid away more and more money until she decided enough was enough. And when they called again, she said, that's it, I don't want to proceed anymore. At which point they turned very, very nasty and said that unless she continued to pay, all sorts of awful things would happen to her. And thankfully, as I understand it, relatives stepped in and put a stop to this, changed her telephone number and changed her banking details, and it was resolved. But I'm told that this is very prevalent and that the fraudsters are predominantly based in Turkey for some unknown reason, but this is a scam that's going round. So I guess the top tip would be, if you want to put an obituary in, please know details where somebody would be able to trace you and to make contact. Going on to holiday scams, beware posting that you're going on holiday on social media. Unfortunately, there is a scam going around at the moment where you might get a call to say that your relative or friend who's gone on holiday has been in an accident and they just need a few thousand to help them out until their cards are replaced or to pay for urgent hospital bills. And this is pretty prevalent during holiday seasons. And the emails are usually terrible grammar, awful spelling, and it doesn't sound like your relative or your friend. And you think to yourself, well, this doesn't sound quite right. And what I would say is, when in doubt, don't pay out. Usually, if you make contact with your relative or friend, you'll find that they're not even on holiday in some cases, and they're perfectly well. So yes, when in doubt, don't pay out. I think that's the mantra. Other popular scams: you've won a prize. No, you haven't. If you haven't entered a competition, you haven't won a prize. Neither have you won an Argos voucher or anything along those lines. You've inherited money. No, you probably haven't. I've had clients who sadly have fallen for this popular scam that goes around, where they have an email saying that their long lost relative has passed away in a foreign country, and an amount of a few thousand is needed in order to release the larger inheritance. This is always a scam, and sadly people do get caught by this. Again, the grammar and spelling are usually poor on these sorts of emails, but it would surprise and upset you to know how many people have been caught in the past. Going on to something which is called a boiler room scam, and this has been around for quite a few years, and sadly I've known people who have been a victim of this sort of scam, and they are usually people who in the past have been experienced investors. You would be contacted by somebody saying that they have a surefire investment opportunity for you, frequently claiming to give you fabulous returns. And as we know at the moment, interest rates are really, really poor. So you'd be forgiven for being tempted. But again, if it sounds too good to be true, it is. And what they tend to do is to take your money and for a period of months might give you some of it back in the form of what appears to be a fantastic dividend, in order to encourage you to invest more. As soon as you stop investing more, you never hear from them again, and all of your money is lost. As I say, they tend to target former professional people and experienced investors. And they do sound very, very plausible. And I sadly have known a number of clients over the years who've been caught in that way. So again, I think, you know, you wouldn't hand money over to somebody on your doorstep, and the telephone approach is the equivalent of these people knocking on your door. So again, just be very, very wary and never give money over the phone. HMRC scams at the moment, this is another popular one, and I would also mention the DVLA. You'll never be asked for money over the phone by the HMRC, and I've heard some really distressing anecdotal details from clients who said that they've had a call from the HMRC to tell them that they're about to be arrested, and that the police are imminently about to knock on their door unless they pay money over now. That simply doesn't happen. HMRC do not operate in that way. And finally, I just wanted to mention, Ian was mentioning earlier about a list of assets and where they are kept. This isn't on the slides, but it just occurred to me when Ian was talking. More and more clients are online these days and have social media accounts. You can also get a virtual vault for all of your online passwords, so that if you were to pass away, your beneficiaries and relatives would have access to your social media accounts, because people these days store photographs and all sorts of things. So I just thought that I would mention that in passing, and that's it for me, and thank you very much for listening. If you've got any questions, do let me know.